Hello, everyone! If you've been paying attention to our car commercials lately,
right now, it feels like the world's standing still.
We live in uncertain times. I, like many of my peers, have been out of a job for several months now, and I've been trying to find constructive ways to use that time. One of the ways I've been trying to do that is by reigniting one of my passions, reading. Now, university killed my passion for reading. You know, there's something about reading constant streams of novels and plays and term papers and syllabuses that just sort of kills your love of the thing, you know? Once you've read a million textbooks, you just don't want to read anymore for a while. But I figured what better way to return to my love of reading than by visiting one of my childhood favorites. And if you've seen the title of this video, you know what I'm talking about. That's right, the Animorphs books! These guys, right here. Aren't they glorious? Animorphs is a series of children's novels written by Catherine Alice Applegate and her husband Michael Grant, as well as a long list of ghostwriters. Long list. The books center around 5 teens who gain a special power called morphing, which they use to combat an alien invasion by a race called the Yeerks. This gives them the power to acquire the DNA of various animals or creatures and transform their bodies into them through that process called morphing. See, there he is, turning into a little lizard dude. Right there. Sorry, not a lizard. It's an anole. Anole? I don't know how to pronounce that. Together with their alien friend Axe, they went on all kinds of science fantasy shenanigans and combated the forces of evil over 60-some books published between 1996 and 2001. Ostensibly, according to my admittedly cursory research, Applegate wrote the series to encourage school kids to try and get more into the animal kingdom. Natural sciences, wild world of creatures, that kind of thing. She wanted to cause them to wonder what it would be like to have the compound eyes of a fly, or the removable tail of a lizard, or the sail as an eagle on the thermals high above the city. There were a lot of thermals. Seriously, the books are like 60% thermals. I've known a lot of joy in my life, but I'll never know the true bliss of riding a thermal high above the pavement. So I should probably just go die in a fire or something, I don't know. In reality, however, the books were far from innocent, family-friendly entertainment. They were a lot closer to young adult novels than a lot of their contemporaries, even though they were aimed at like 9 to 13-year-olds. I read this stuff when I was 8, and back then the Scholastic catalog mostly consisted of babysitters solving mysteries and magic tree houses that could travel through time, that sort of thing. I wonder if there was some Doctor Who inspiration there. Animorphs was something else. Sure, they had their fun trips to the mall and their Cinnabon shenanigans with their Andalite buddy who'd never tasted food before. There was tons of teenage romance and fun drama, that kind of stuff. But there was also a lot of really dark stuff. Now, the central conflict of the series involves slugs that enter the human brain through the ear, taking control of their host body and using them to try and subjugate the entire human race and take over the planet. Unwilling slaves in the fight against their own people. The main characters of the series were essentially child soldiers drafted into a war they didn't start. When they weren't shape-changing in horrifically detailed Cronenberg-esque transformations, they were getting their bodies sliced open by Hork-Bajir arm blades, or their limbs blown off by Yeerk laser gun thingies. I can't remember what they were called. Draken beams. That's the one. Or they were watching Yeerk Taxan slaves cannibalize their wounded friend in a grotesque and bloody feeding frenzy. His Andalite head grew larger, much larger. The 4 horse-like legs merged into 2 and then expanded, each leg becoming as big around as a redwood tree. The delicate Andalite arms sprouted and became tentacles. "This isn't real," Cassie whispered. "This isn't real." In the hideously bloated head, a mouth appeared. It was filled with teeth as long as your arm. The mouth grew wider and wider, becoming a monstrous, terrifying grin. The Taxan controllers rushed forward and crowded around Visor 3. They seemed to be stretching up toward him, and then I saw why. A piece of the andalite fell from the Vizir's jaws and the nearest Taxon greedily gobbled it up. Tobias turned away and covered his face with his hands. Cassie had tears streaming from her eyes. So did I. I heard a sound that was strange because it was so normal. It was laughter. Human laughter. God! These books had more war crimes than a political thriller and a body count higher than an HBO drama. It was scary, traumatic, often nauseating stuff. And I loved every minute of it. Little 8-year-old Jacob gobbled that up. Anytime we visited our local chapter store, I would rush to the Animorphs section to see if they had the latest book, or just to gaze at the cool covers. I mean, look at these covers! They had like holographics on them. They had a new animal for each single one. Some of them, oh yeah, they all opened up and you could see the like little scene from the book that they were transforming for. It was so good. Anytime the Scholastic Book Fair booklet showed up, I would comb through to see what kind of Animorphs stuff they had. I even convinced my parents to let me sign up for the fan club for a month because it came with this sick-ass book. What are these called? Bookends that contained all the books you could fit in them. They had these little inserts that had the different morphs on them. It came with this little booklet full of all kinds of it's called the Secret Flip Book, and it has stuff about the lore and the animals, and yeah, when you do this, it does the like, hey look, they're transforming. I don't know if that worked or not. I couldn't see the screen. It even came with a membership card, which sadly I have since lost. This is one of my deepest, darkest secrets, but I even tried once alone in my bedroom to acquire the DNA of my dog Tanner and transform into him, even though I'd never come in contact with an andalite morphing cube in my entire life, but thus is the mind of an 8-year-old child. Yeah, I was a weird kid. Now, eventually, at least for me, the books started to sort of peter off. They got a little too dark for my tastes. I had very delicate sensibilities at the time. And as more and more ghostwriters took over, I feel like the quality kind of started to dip. Having not read them all, I shouldn't say that, but it was my impression at the time. But by the end, the series had rallied to a jaw-dropping conclusion that completely blew me away. It still leaves me reeling when I think about it years later. Eventually, though, Animorphs slipped into obscurity and became forgotten by time. A brief reissue of the earliest novels occurred in the 2010s, but after that, they just sort of faded into the annals of chapter book history. But all that changed in 2020 when two things happened. First, Scholastic Audio began releasing audiobook versions of the earliest novels through Audible. At the time of recording this, there are the first 10 books already released there. I haven't listened to them or checked them out because they're $17 each, which, considering the original MSRP was like $4.99 Canadian, $17 feels like a lot. But still, as an Animorphs fan, this was super exciting. This was the first official re-release in almost 10 years. So big deal. But the second and even more exciting thing happened much more recently. It was announced in January. I didn't hear about it till March because I was, losing my job due to a global pandemic. The announcement contained the jaw-dropping news that the first 3 books were being adapted into graphic novel form by an artist named Chris Grine. Grine? I should have messaged him on Twitter or something. I just looked it up. According to this interview on YouTube, it's pronounced Grine. Chris Grine. Sorry, Mr. Grine, if you're out there. I didn't mean to disrespect you by mispronouncing your name. Okay, back to the script. They were being adapted by Scholastic Graphics into comic book form, which is the perfect medium to enjoy these books. The first one just released, and I got my hands on it just the other day, and it is spectacular. If you were an Animorphs fan or you're looking to get into the series, this is the perfect product for you. The art style is deceptively cartoony almost. It kind of reminds me of the old Magic School Bus books if they were illustrating sci-fi horror children's novels. It's great. And more importantly, if these books do well, then Chris Grine might be contracted to do even more, which would be awesome because, again, This is the perfect medium for these stories. I may be using the odd picture from this book to help illustrate my points as I go through this video today, because the artwork is just that good. While this is very, very good, it's not the full topic of the video that we're here to discuss today. If you want me to do a proper review of this, please let me know in the comments below. We might do it at some point. It's just that good. But I want to make sure people are interested before I give it a full, day of shooting. Anyway, after I heard about the graphic novel back in March, my passion for Animorphs got reignited, and I found all the original novels in ebook form, completely legally, and started rereading them, beginning with The Invasion, the first novel on which the graphic novel is based. And let me tell you, it holds up. I often worry about some products from the 90s, like TV shows, movies, because they don't always hold up to modern standards. Sometimes they can be a little questionable. Looking at you, friends.
It's like leaving behind a piece of your heart.
Sandy, that's exactly what it is.
Are you gay?
Some of the things still hold up, a lot of it still doesn't. But the quality of the storytelling on display in The Invasion is top tier stuff for its age category. The writing style is still very much geared towards kids, with very melodramatic flourishes and big reveals here and there, shorter chapters that are really easy to get through. Also, it's just so 90s, which I think is both a good and a bad thing. But we're not here to talk about the book, or its near perfect adaptation into the comic book format. We're here to talk about the TV show. That's right, friends and neighbors, there was an Animorphs TV show. In 1998, Scholastic Productions and Protocol Entertainment headed to Toronto, Canada to film the first season of Animorphs TV.
Animorphs, coming to video spring 1999.
It ran for 2 seasons with a total of 26 episodes, and it was heavily advertised on the inside covers of some of the novels at the time. I remember seeing the moody faces of the teens staring out at you from inside the books, daring you to turn on YTV and join their televised revolution. Trying to find one here. Yeah, technically this is an ad for the Megamorphs, but there they are. Oh, look at them go. By the time the TV show came out, though, my family had canceled cable and thoroughly committed to that farmer vision lifestyle, which we would maintain basically all the way up until the Netflix era, so I never wound up checking it out. That was until 2006, when I was hospitalized in my 16th year on this God's green earth. Basically a foot and a half of my intestine just shriveled up and died and tried to take me with it. It was a whole thing. One of the Bee Gees died of it, apparently. As a result, I was cooped up in a hospital room for almost 10 days. I had to take food through a tube up my nose. I couldn't drink water, just crushed ice chips. It was abysmal. Fortunately, the hospital had one of those TVs on wheels you could borrow for a couple hours at a time. It had an ancient piece of technology called a VCR in it, which used these strange black tapes that you would plug into them, and then they would play back pre-recorded images. It was a different time. And in their collection of VHS tapes, they had the officially released pilot of the old Animorphs TV show, untouched and forgotten for God knows how long. So after my family brought them to my bed, along with a bunch of other videos to choose from, and the VCR, there I was, 16 years old, blissed out on morphine, watching the pilot of a TV series based on a children's series that I loved very, very much in my childhood. I don't remember anything about them outside of a few flashes because I was really high at the time, but I do remember some visuals and that corny-ass theme song. However, I do remember really thoroughly enjoying myself. So it's safe to say that Animorphs TV was an unbridled success and a gem in the history of children's television, right? I don't know, I was high, so let's find out together, shall we? In the year of our Lord 2020, let's go! So the series opens with narration by Jake, played by none other than Canada's own Shawn Ashmore of X-Men and The Boys fame. Until recently, I thought that he also co-starred in Killjoys, but turns out that was his twin brother. I was weirdly excited to discover that fact. There's two of them. This was, by all accounts, Shawn Ashmore's sort of first lead role, so good for him. The show starts appropriately with a narration.
My name is Jake. Half an hour ago, I was just a regular kid. Not anymore.
This, I think, was an attempt to sort of echo the monologue found on the backs of the books. The "we can't tell you who we are or where we live" thing, you know? So props to that. I'm sure fans of the books at the time really appreciated that attention to form. And, as in the book, the show begins in an arcade, which was a thing we had in the before times, where people could congregate in public to play video games. For more information on these strange social gatherings, please refer to the award-winning documentary film Wreck-It Ralph.
230,000 points. Please enter your name.
Now, this would be clever if it at all reflected how high scores actually worked back in the day. As it is, it's more of a corny joke. And I love corny jokes, so good on you, Animorphs TV. We meet Marco, the wisecracker, who so far has made nothing resembling a joke, and Jake's dog, Homer. Now, this is our first deviation from the source material. We don't meet Homer the dog until much later in the book, when he becomes Jake's first morph. I think that may be important soon. We then cut to Tobias, who looks like he's playing the same game in a totally different arcade. Jake and Marco have this futuristic console they're standing at, whereas Tobias, the impoverished, bullied outcast, seems to be slumming it hunched over an old DOS monitor while his fellow nerds look on. Is this like the arcade ghetto? Is one side for the cool kids and one side for the poor kids? I'm just so confused already. Still, this does give him sort of a hacker vibe, which, as we know, makes you the coolest of the nerds in the 1990s. For more on that phenomenon, please refer to the definitely not award-winning documentary film, Hackers.
Alert! Please enter more coins. 1 minute playing time to go.
Insert more coins? It's a PC. Where do you expect to put the coins in? The floppy disk slot? And now we meet our other heroes, Cassie and Rachel. Cassie's sort of the nice girl trope in this series, the most empathetic and also the most capable at morphing. Rachel in the books is described sort of as a blonde Xena who mostly lives to kick ass and be sassy. Marco makes a sexist remark and she shuts him down for it. Kind of?
Where have you been? One word. Sail.
Excuse me, but I am captain of the gymnastics team. We had a meet.
That was simultaneously some of the worst character exposition I've ever seen, and one of the worst line deliveries yet. I'm a bit concerned about the quality of acting on display here. All of a sudden, things go a bit strange. The game goes haywire, and Homer starts freaking out. He runs away, and the gang goes chasing after him into the abandoned construction site. It's implied that the dogs, and I guess the computers, are subconsciously aware of the battle currently occurring in low orbit, and Homer here is used as a means of getting our protagonists into the abandoned construction site for the crash landing of the Andalite ship. Now, I don't like this change very much. In the books, they cut through the construction site because it was a shortcut home. It was really quite poetic. Like, what if we listened to our parents and gone home the long way? Yeah, we'd be screwed, but at least we'd have lived in peace for a couple months more before we had alien slugs implanted in our heads. You know, at least we'd have the illusion of safety for a little while longer. Here it just sort of feels like an accident, which kind of robs it of some of its gravitas. Anyway, they find Homer with Tobias acting super weird, which is sorta on brand for Tobias. More on that later. Oh, spoiler alert for the books, by the way. Little late on that. My bad. Tobias sees something in the sky, and a spaceship crashes into the construction site. So far so good, and we're back on track with the plot. The alien ship actually doesn't look too bad. Props to the special effects department. I like the design, though I think I prefer the one in the graphic novel, to be honest. That one looks more like what is described in the book, and could even possibly be a subtle homage to Star Trek, a major influence on Applegate and Grant. And we now get our first glimpse of an Andalite. Or do we? Disappointingly, Elfangor looks like total ass. We never get a proper body shot, and what we do get is baby's first creature shop. This doesn't look like a living creature at all. I get that it's expensive and difficult to make a CG or animatronic puppet, but come on, this show is about an alien invasion. It doesn't give me much confidence in the longevity of the series when you can't even afford to show an alien. The Andalite is injured, and our kind protagonist naturally rush to help. It starts communicating with them telepathically, and our heroes start to try and offer up some kind of plan.
Jake, give me a shirt. He's wounded.
There's nothing you can do for me.
It's gonna be okay. Cassie knows a lot about animals.
Jeez, Rachel, not good in a first contact scenario.
Way to insult the guy, Rach.
Elfangor tells them of the war with the Yeerks, and much like in the book, does so with a projected vision of a Yeerk entering its host. And it is janky as hell. This CG was outdated even by 1998 standards, but it gets the point across, so I guess mission accomplished?
There is no time for questions. I must do what I can for you. I have no choice. I can give you a way to fight the Yeerks.
I'm not even going to ask where he was hiding that giant glowing cube. This is actually another disappointing omission from the book. In the book, it's Jake who finds the cube at the Andalite's direction, boarding the ship and finding a picture of Elfangor and his family. But I guess building a spaceship interior would be kind of expensive for a show whose location budget appears to be $2,000. Elfangor bestows the morphing power on them, giving them an info dump on the rules. Touch an animal, absorb its DNA, and morph into it. But no staying in morph for longer than 2 hours, or you're stuck forever in morph form. Elfangor even calls out Tobias by name, hinting at their eventual connection that's revealed much later. It gets kinda weird around the 14 bookmark. The kids touch the cube and gain the morphing power, just in time for a villain to show up in his equally good-looking spaceship. They must have blown their entire budget on these compared to the creatures, because they look good. And here we get our next major plot deviation. Elfangor tries to give Tobias a weird alien MacGuffin.
Don't twist, Tobias, with your heart and your soul.
I don't like this edition very much. In the book, Elfangor does give Tobias a vision that helps him better understand the rules of morphing and the context of the conflict. It allowed Applegate to sort of tease out the exposition over the course of a few chapters without having to dump it all on the reader at once. This alien disc thing, I don't know what this is for. We'll have to wait and see, but definitely more wait than see, as Tobias doesn't even get close to the disc before his friends pull him away. Great guarding, Tobias. You should probably work on that whole heart and soul thing. And here we meet Visser 3, a Yeerk in an Andalite body. And he looks just as jank as Elfangor. I'm pretty sure they used some of the exact same shots, just reversed her for in slightly different angles. The whole thing feels just a little lazy, very cheap, and extremely underwhelming. Andalites are just such a cool visual design, and it's a shame we don't get to actually see one in this episode. If 8-year-old Jacob had been watching, he'd be monumentally disappointed. I mean, I'm disappointed. We do get a full facial shot at least, showing off their unique-looking eye stalks and their lack of mouth. But those eyes are just so weird-looking. You can tell Visser 3's the bad guy, too, because they swapped the green eyes for red ones. Ooh, much scary, such evil. Elfangor and Visser 3 trade jabs at each other while further revealing the scale of this conflict. I'm not sure why Visser 3 is treating his Andalite body as a revelation, considering that it's Elfangor's fault that he was able to capture one in the first place.
Visser 3.
Yes, I have taken one of your Andalite bodies as my host. Your Andalite morphing technology has been so very useful to me.
This was all revealed much later in the Andalite Chronicles prequel book. I know they had to get that information somehow, I just wish they could have done it in a way that didn't hamstring the canon of the existing timeline of the novels.
Why Earth? Why these people?
Because there are so many, and they're so weak. Our army will be 1 billion strong. And then I promise you one thing, Elfangor. I will return to your world and personally oversee the infestation of your entire family.
Ooh, I'm very pleased they kept Visser 3's gruesome last threat to Elfangor, though again in the book, Jake had actually got a glimpse of the Andalite's family, so it landed a little harder there than it does here. And Visser 3 morphs into a giant monster, eating and killing the wounded Elfangor. We don't get to see the monster or the morph, but we do get the shadow, and I'm actually okay with this. Lets our imagination do the work, which here feels more appropriate. Whatever my mind is going to conjure here is going to be unquestionably better than anything they could have managed to afford to do on screen, so props to them for that choice. Plus, the original scene was probably a little too graphic for kids' TV. The mouth closed, the teeth ripped the Andalite apart, and the Andalite prince Elfangor Seriniel Shamtul died. At the very end, he cried out. His cry of despair was in our heads. His cry will always be in our heads. Again, this is a series for children! Rachel gives away their position. In the book, I think it was Jake. And the controllers present give chase, including the absolute worst-looking Hork-Bajir head. In the books, the Hork-Bajir were the terrifying foot soldiers of the Yeerks, a peaceful race enslaved for their easily weaponized bodies. Here we just get a comically bad head and a warped POV camera filter with a weird sound overlaid the footage.
I'm right here! Come on, let's go!
Eventually, there's a full body shot, but it's so brief and bad, it almost should have been omitted completely. Like, is that what the Hork-Bajir are supposed to look like? No. Oh god, they're like raptors. They're like evil, sentient raptors. Ah!
What is that? Wanna hang around and find out? No, thanks. I'll read the book.
This is Marco's first joke that lands. It doesn't really make sense in the context of the show, but it's metatextual and delightfully corny. And I love corny jokes, so good on you, Animorphs TV. Cassie gets stuck in some junk, so Jake leads the creature away from the group. He runs at a comically slow pace. The Hork-Bajir is so close on his heels that it cuts him and physically rips his shirt, yet somehow he still manages to effectively hide with Homer in a pipe. This makes absolutely no sense and really reveals the show's biggest weakness, the editing. They couldn't really afford to show any of the creatures on screen, so to amp up the stakes they really had to get clever with the footage, but it feels like they don't have enough footage to work with, so the edits wind up feeling very strange and nonsensical, like entire chunks of the action are missing. Now this is either a budgeting issue or a lack of directorial planning on set, and my money is actually kind of on both. They probably should have done some better storyboarding before getting on location, because what we have here is just a confusing mess. Anyway, back in the tube, we also get a look at an ominous figure whose scary trait is that he cleans his shoes. Dun dun dun! More on him later. Jake decides in order to escape to try out his morphing power for the first time. Now, I know why they did it this way. In the books, his first morph is in a controlled environment. He morphs into Homer in his bedroom with Tobias there offering guidance. This is much more dramatic, certainly, but it does rob us of the cool factor of that first morph, the wonder at the excitement the gang feels at this newfound ability to experience the animal kingdom. Still, to my delight, they do a great job of showing the morph. Nice clear visuals and some actually pretty good special effects for 1998 TV. It's not as horrifying as it is often described in the books, with crunching bones and twisting limbs, but it gets the job done. Mad props to the team for this stellar CG work. Also, Homer is the calmest boy I've ever seen. He watches his master transform into him with nothing but the quietest of whimpers. 10 out of 10. Good doggy. Jake and Homer make their escape, and once more we have some very confusing directing. Visser 3 is actually supposed to be present in this scene, but none of the actors quite know where he's supposed to be. Their eye lines are all over the place.
Did you find them?
No, sir! Just a couple of dogs!
But Jake escapes and meets up the next day with his friends at school. The five of them discuss what they saw and debate what to do next, and this is my least favorite scene in the episode so far. The writing and acting are serviceable, but the cinematography is nauseating. The scene's composed of a spinning camera and quick cuts as the director tries to somehow focus on all five characters at once. I get what they're going for and how hard it can be to shoot a group conversation like this, but the shots just cut too quick and change direction too often, and the result just sort of makes me sick to my stomach. I actually had to look away the first time I watched this because I was starting to feel dizzy. A+ for creativity, D- for execution. So while the director's making me sick to my stomach, the characters discuss the missing disc and try to figure out how to get it back. Once again, I really dislike this MacGuffin. It feels a little too J.J. Abrams mystery box to me, and the plot of the original book was so concise it didn't need any embellishment. But we'll see where this goes. It's then that Mr. Chapman, the vice principal of their school, is introduced and simultaneously revealed to be a controller! If it weren't for the Yerk propensity for shiny footwear, the Animorphs would have been none the wiser, and the slugs might have won the war. Cursed by their own foot-related hubris! We end on a paranoid freeze frame in the cafeteria, and that's it for part 1 of My Name is Jake. So far, my impressions are mixed. We have some fairly decent acting, the cast all looks the part, but the special effects are a real crapshoot. Some look amazing for the time, while others, like the creature puppets, look outdated by at least 30 years. So far, it feels like a cheap tie-in rather than a genuine attempt to recreate the source material, which in fairness, it kinda was. I'm also really annoyed at the unnecessary deviations from the book, since they really didn't need any of these frills stapled onto them. I get that TV's a different medium from books, but it didn't need that much tweaking to be filmable. I don't know, the novel just makes more sense than the events of the TV show so far, so I don't know, maybe they'll stick the landing in part 2. I initially planned this to be an episode covering both parts 1 and 2 of the pilot, but there's just so much to talk about in this first episode that I feel like it needed its own video to do it justice. I'd like to say for sure we're going to be doing a sequel video to cover the second part of the pilot, but in all honesty, those of you who follow me on Twitch and elsewhere know that it took me 6 months to get over my COVID depression and actually sit down to film this thing. Huge shout out to my therapist for the kick in the pants I needed to actually get it done today. That said, if you want a sequel video to this, leave a comment below and let me know. It'd really be a big help because I'm really just starting out here. If you liked my content, feel free to swing by my Twitch channel where I talk about other nerdy stuff like this and play a bunch of really good games. We're in the middle of a sort of Halloween-themed Spooktober this month, so feel free to check that out in the link in the description below, where I'll also put my Discord so you can vote on the games we're playing. And if you have any feedback you want to give on the video, please let me know. I'm very new to this, so any constructive criticism or feedback is much appreciated. I'm HamletSandwich. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video. Have a good day. I'm actually going to call it right now that we're very close to getting a reboot TV series of this. Whether it's like a CW drama where they age up the characters like they do in this one to make it sort of sexy, or if it's a Stranger Thing-esque genuine take on kids saving the world, is yet to be determined, but I have no doubt in mind that in the next 5 years, we're going to see another TV show like this, and I hope it's really awesome.